My name is Cydnee Sanders. If you watched any of our previous videos, welcome back. And if you're watching for the first time, thanks for joining us and be sure to check out our other videos and topics. This series is in partnership with Atlas ABE in St. Paul, Minnesota. We put together a series of videos that will address much needed conversations and professional development for adult education educators. We hope these videos will provide bite-sized professional development that you can watch and hopefully discuss with your colleagues. Even if you're doing these on your own, you'll be able to reflect on these topics. I'll talk more at the end about the accompanying discussion guide that you can use as a resource. Today's topic is analyzing our lessons with the culture tree. If you haven't already, I recommend watching the video before this called Building Relationships as a Classroom Routine. It went more in depth into another way to use the culture tree, but I will review it here also, so no worries. Remember, in any of these topics, 10 to 15 minutes is not enough. So the idea of this, or really our hope, is that these begin the conversations among educators. Then we will do a weekend to present different ideas, resources, and solutions in bite-sized chunks. As I mentioned, this is one topic out of a series we'll be doing called Moving Equity Forward in Adult Education. Be sure to check out our other videos. All right, let's start with an overview of our discussion today. Today, we started with the welcome. Next, we'll do another community check-in, which is a question I will pose to y'all to think about before the topic continues. Then we will quickly review the culture tree, especially for those who didn't watch the previous video. After that, we will look at some examples of how to use this tool in our classrooms as a way to analyze our lesson plans. And finally, we will wrap up by briefly going over the accompanying discussion guide. So let's start with our community check-in. Today's question is, what is one thing you like sharing about your own culture or background in class? While I believe it is extremely important to make space for our learners' cultures in class, as I've said before, first, we have to be aware of our own culture and how we bring it into class. And as I talked about in the last video, building relationships as a classroom community is important, and we are included in that. We should share parts of our culture and background too to make meaningful connections with learners. Feel free to pause the video for a minute to think about this. If you're watching this with others, take a moment and talk about your answers. Great. If you paused, welcome back. For me, since much of my teaching experience is with level 1 English classes, food is an easy example to talk about and to show a connection. In Minnesota, many of students are Somali, and they eat sambusas, which are very similar to our meat pies in Louisiana Creole culture. Both can have different meats, often ground beef with onions and peppers, within a fried bread. I like to show them that the difference is the shape. Sambusas are triangles and meat pies are semicircles. This is a fun connection between our cultures. As I said at the beginning, we are going to review the culture tree for those who need a refresher or those who haven't seen the other video. If you don't need a refresher, feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes and then we will look at more ways to use this tool in our classroom. The culture tree is similar to the cultural iceberg, which I know more people tend to be familiar with, but I like this version, which comes from Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, which I highly, highly recommend this book. We'll look at it zoomed in just a second. Hammond explains a tree is part of a bigger ecosystem that shapes and impacts its growth and development. It has 3 levels from surface level to deep culture. In classes, typically we can think about talking about food and music is enough, but I believe as a teacher, it is my job to facilitate conversations that get at the heart of deeper parts of culture. That's what makes class relevant and equitable because as we learn about different ways of doing things and thinking about things, I then realize how not to base every aspect of class on my own culture. Sometimes we don't even realize how much of our own culture influences the stories, the curriculum we pick, and the questions we ask. Now, let's zoom in on each level. The leaves are what Hammond considers the surface culture. These are the everyday observable patterns that most people think of when they think of culture, like language, food, and holidays. Hammond explains that these are really only the surface level with a low emotional impact on people. These things don't build trust in a deep way. Now, don't get me wrong, they are super fun and interesting to learn about, but there's even more we can learn. The trunk of the tree is shallow culture. These are the things like concept of time, tempo of work, and nonverbal communication. These are unspoken rules and they have a higher impact on building trust and relationships with people. I see how many of these play out in everyday cross-cultural communication, especially different definitions of eye contact, nonverbal communication, and we know a lot of our students have very different definitions of time, right? Finally, we have the roots, which represent deep culture, like how we make decisions, our notions of fairness, and concepts of self, like if we value individualism or collectivism or somewhere in between. These are the collective, unconscious beliefs and norms that drive our culture. Understanding these have an intense emotional impact on building relationships. Now, this is a cool concept, but how do we use this in our classroom? For today, I have a couple of reflection questions and then a classroom example. These are some suggested questions to ask yourself while making lessons or thinking about activities. Number one, ask yourself, which aspects of culture does this lesson connect with? Two, how can I use it to ask learners about their own experiences based on the text? Three, which aspects can connect to a conversation about social and environmental justice? And four, how can the tree be used as a routine for critical thinking? Again, culture can be so complex. I like this tool because it helps us name pretty abstract things. It's a guide. It doesn't give us answers, but it helps us name something we can think of with more tangible discussion questions to ask our topics to include. So, as I said in the last video, I believe there are many ways to use this tool in our classrooms. And in the last video, we looked at a way to use it to help plan routines for building relationships in the classroom. Today, I want to look at an example of how to use it to analyze lesson plans, especially ones that we already use. I don't want us as busy educators to recreate the wheel and use all new lessons. Many of us have a set curriculum we can use. This tool is about how to expand those lessons by making them more culturally relevant. Let's take a look at one of my favorite examples. I have a colleague in Minnesota who shared an example where they were teaching a lesson on water safety. They had two pictures of lakes, one clean and one dirty. They showed the dirty one first and asked the students if they would swim there, and they said no. My friend always emphasizes how passionately they said no. Then they showed Clean Lake Superior and asked the students if they would swim there. And they said, no, again. My friend was so surprised because according to their experience of Minnesota lake culture, they would obviously want to swim in Lake Superior. They asked why not, and the student said, because of the alligators. Now, I love this story because as someone not from Minnesota, I am not about swimming in lakes like everyone else seems to be. In Texas, I would be worried about gators and water moccasins. It's such a good example of how culture shapes the smallest of things. And this is not only a regional difference. This is a cultural difference too. Regions have their own cultures. We have many cultures depending on the social groups we are a part of. It's so hard to know when we make assumptions because we don't know what we don't know, but we can increase our awareness that we do not have to be, there does not have to be only one right way of doing something. So we can be on the lookout for other explanations and ask learners about their own experiences. I have found the culture tree by Hammond to be a great tool to examine my own lessons and make space for to learn about students' cultures. Let's take a closer look at this example. A few minutes ago, I showed y'all some suggested reflection questions. We are going to use the first three questions for this example. The first question was, which aspects of culture does this lesson connect with? So, in the water safety example lesson, which aspect of culture does this lesson connect with? I would say relationship to nature and animals. This was part of the roots or deep culture of the tree. Now, the second question is, how can I use the tree to ask learners about their own experiences based on the text? Once I name the part of culture, I can use it to help me think of discussion questions. Here are some examples of different levels of questions based on your class level. Do you know how to swim? Do you like swimming? Why or why not? How often did you swim as a kid? Did you have places to swim nearby, pools, lakes, and ocean? Did you learn about water safety? If so, what did you learn? What animals live near you? Dangerous ones? How do you make sure you stay safe? Which animals are considered sacred in your culture? All of these questions get students thinking about their relationship and experiences with water and animals by activating their prior knowledge. I know many of us learn the importance of activating prior knowledge for adult learners to make connections to new academic knowledge. The tree just gives you a cultural frame to do that. Then you can move into a text or a video that continues this topic. Remember, with student-led discussions, it's important to have as much student talk as possible so they have agency in the classroom and are actively learning and using language. The third question was, which aspects can connect to a conversation about social and environmental justice? Another way you can deepen these discussions is connecting it to social and environmental justice issues that deeply impact learners' lives. Water quality is a huge issue all over the world, but especially in Minnesota. You can have conversations about litter, the harm of single-use plastic, chemicals from factories and mining making drinking water unsafe. This could lead to a whole science unit about water treatment or even about native resistance to oil pipelines crossing treaty land. All of these issues are very relevant to learners' lives and provide authentic topics for classroom learning. Keep in mind trauma-informed practices, such as not forcing students to share personal things if they are not comfortable doing so, giving students options, give them time to process. I hope to make another video about trauma-informed practices, so stay tuned. But most of the time, learners want to share, so it's worth a try. All right, that's it for today's bite-sized task. Don't forget to visit the discussion guide for this video to deepen your understanding of this episode's topic. The link to the discussion guide can be found in the description to the video on YouTube and also linked on the Atlas website. The discussion guide provides questions, activities, and resources to learn more. We have linked the PDF of the slides in the guide also for your own notes. Also, remember to check out Atlas's Cultural Competency Library and the Minnesota ABE Connect newsletter for more resources. All right, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to watch the entire playlist, like and subscribe so you don't miss a video, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.